There's a lot happening right now. I'm not going to list it. It's on your feed, it's on their feed. And some of what's circulating, people have watched things they didn't choose to watch, actual violence on their phones, in between everything else. And then they come to class and you're supposed to teach Frankenstein. Here's what I want to tell you. Frankenstein is enough. Your curriculum can hold this. You don't need a special lesson. Today, I'm going to show you two moves: find the frame and hold the space. That's it. This is the Anti-Burnout PLC. I'm Danielle. Every week you show up, we work through something together, you leave with something you can use. You bring your week, I bring mine, and we figure it out. But before I get into the framework, I want to be honest about something. I keep seeing people say things like there's a lot going on right now, like it's a weather report, like we're describing a busy news cycle. And I don't think that's what this is. People are watching real violence on their phones, not because they went looking for it, but because the algorithm served it between everything else. Official statements are coming out that directly contradict what's on the video. Evidence is being released about powerful people, and nothing is happening. Your students are watching all of this, and some of them can't stop watching it. And the thing that makes this different from a heavy news week is that it's not an information problem. It's not that people don't know what's happening. The evidence is right there. Everyone can see it, and it doesn't seem to matter. That's not media literacy. That's something else. I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what to call it, but I know what it feels like in a classroom. It feels like the ground shifted and you're supposed to keep teaching. I think one of the important things for us to remember right now is that our students are getting this information regardless of whether we give them the information. And some students are getting this information without having an outlet to talk about it in any way. They're receiving all kinds of conflicting information. They are processing things that they thought they understood and now don't. And if we do not give them a place to communicate and process, they'll either maybe do it with the algorithm or not at all. And it'll just keep festering and circling. The thing is, I don't I don't want to suggest that what we need to do right now is to take the news and to teach it directly. Something that I want to suggest is, and I've been trying to think about different ways to say this, but what I'm going to come down to is stay in your lane. And I don't mean stay in your lane as a like sit down over there and make sure that you stay in your place. What I mean is stay in your lane as an empowering kind of thing, because staying in your lane means like speak from what you know and understand. My job is to teach the curriculum, and the most defensible professional space we have is our core expertise, which is literary analysis. I can give them frameworks, ways of thinking about how information reaches us, how narratives get constructed, how we decide what to believe, who gets to tell the story, whose voice we hear first, and whose voice we never hear at all. That's literary analysis, but it's also how you survive 2026. I I can't tell my students what to think about what's happening, but I can teach them how to think, and that's not nothing. I think that's actually really the strength that we can bring right now. So here's the first move. It's find the frame. I don't mean something terrible has happened. Now let me figure out how to connect my lesson to it. What I mean is, what is this text already about? So, literature, I think we got into literature, or I got into literature. What really speaks to me about it is that it explores the human condition. Every text worth teaching is already holding a conversation about power or justice or identity or what we owe each other or what happens when we create things we can't control. I don't think we need to make it relevant. It already is. I think that's what makes our discipline so awesome, because we actually can have all these great conversations about what happens in the world and what happens as humans. We do all kinds of things, like we are teaching critical thinking, we are teaching media literacy, we're teaching empathy. These are the skills and the ways of living that our world needs right now, and we have the opportunity to teach our students how to think, how to read the world and how to be in community. Okay, so right now I'm teaching Frankenstein. Frankenstein is already about this. Think about the structure of the novel. We're in a frame narrative. Walton writes letters to his sister about what Victor told him about what happens with the creature. We don't hear from the creature himself until the middle of the text. By then, Victor has been calling him a monster and a wretch and a demon for pages and pages. We've already been told what to think about him before he even opens his mouth. And when he speaks, his story is different from what Victor told us. We understand that he was abandoned and he taught himself how to read. He watched a family through a little crack in the wall and learned what love looked like. And he wanted that connection. And he was really met with violence everywhere he went. And we can think about what Mary Shelley was trying to say here. And even what she was trying to say here in the construction, how she wanted to show us a story in layers. The lesson isn't about the news, right? But it's a framework students can apply anywhere. And I think, like, even now, if we think about how we receive information, what we are told to understand versus what we actually see and think, um, sometimes those line up and sometimes they don't. So here's what I'm actually doing this week. I have some journals that I'm going to ask my students to add on to what I was already planning. So I'll ask them, what are you noticing about how information reaches us in this novel? And where have you seen this in real life? So that first part of the question is just straight literary analysis. It's the actual text. How does information move through these frame narratives? Who tells whom in what order, what do we believe before we're supposed to? And then the second one is theirs. And they might take this in any direction. They might write about what's happening in the news. They might write about something completely different, maybe gossip or family dynamics, or a time they heard one story and they found out the truth was a little bit more complicated. So I'm not telling them where to go. I'm giving them a framework and letting them apply it. Some of them will write about what's on their phones. Some of them will write about their parents' divorce. Some of them will write about something I never could have predicted. And that's the thing. The framework is mine, but the application is theirs. And I think that's like what we need to do right now is just give them spaces for them to have that conversation. We don't need to tell them where to go. We just need to have an open space for them. Let me give you two more examples from my teaching in the past because this can give you some ideas. So, I've been putting together this unit for The Great Gatsby, and I had this moment where I was looking at the soundtrack, and I started noticing that Jay-Z was doing something in that soundtrack from the Baz Luhrmann film. This is the short version. Jay-Z was executive producer. He worked on that for 2 years. He was executive producer of both the soundtrack and the film itself. When you look at the track list, there's this argument happening. I understand it should be an argument about who covers whom. So Beyonce and Andre 3000 cover Amy Winehouse, and this is the one that started me thinking, um, because I was just like, why did that happen? And I was also really curious because I noticed that the Brian Ferry Orchestra covers the entire soundtrack. And what the Brian Ferry Orchestra does is they converted all the songs, and you know that there's a lot of pop um, or contemporary songs, and made everything sound like, you know, jazz from the 1920s. So I started wondering, like, what is it that Jay Z is doing here? And what I came to see is that the cover directions are actually an argument. Jay-Z is actually making a concept album here, and what he was trying to say, I think, is debatable, but I didn't find anything in my research about anyone saying that Jay-Z was actually doing something on purpose. So I think that the critics of the time completely missed that something that was happening. They did talk about, like, hip hop updates, and they talked about the connection that we can make between Jay-Z and Gatsby, but they didn't really see an architecture there. So I have students discover it themselves. They work in expert groups, and each one is researching one artist, and then they map the borrowing directions together and find something that really even the professional critics didn't name. And that is literary analysis, but it's also who tells whose story and who gets credit and who gets erased and what is legitimate and who decides that. February right now is Black History Month, and Frederick Douglass's birthday is Valentine's Day. And something I find really interesting about Frederick Douglass is he was the most photographed American of the 19th century, even more than Lincoln. And if you take a look at all of his pictures, they all look very similar, and he never smiled. He was very serious. He did this because he understood that the images of Black people were being controlled by others. And the way that this was portrayed were caricatures, there were racist depictions, and he wanted to control his own image. So for him, every photograph was an argument. And he said, "This is who I am. This is how I choose to be seen." I got so into this. I actually made a freebie that you can get in the description, and I'll drop that in the pinned comment as well. So right now, when the evidence is right there on video and officials are telling you it shows something other than what it shows, Douglas feels really relevant. He knew something about images and narrative control that we're all living through again. So that's find the frame. And you notice what I'm doing is I'm not actually directly saying, like, this is what you need to understand about what's happening here in our current life. It's connections that students can make, but we do not have to direct them there. So and like I said, they can go in a completely different direction, and that's totally fine. It's just giving students the space to talk if they want to. So that's find the frame. And the second move is hold the space. And I think it just means being present and leaving those openings and letting the conversation go where it goes. So when a student connects the text to something that's happening in their life or something in the world, you don't have to fix it or teach it or turn it into a lesson. You just have to receive it. So thank you for sharing that. That's a real connection, or I hear you. And that's it. You're not solving the world's problems in your classroom. You are in a way, but not really. Um, you're a person who built a space where thinking happens, and you're just present when they bring themselves to it. Really, the text is the container here. That's what holds the conversation. And then you hold the safety. And what's I think sustainable about this doesn't add to your pile. It's not grading. It's just creating a space for processing without requiring you to have all the answers. And I want to name why this matters for sustainability right now, because that's what PLC is about. We have all these things that are happening in the world, and I think we all feel pressure to respond, and to respond in the correct way, and to address it in exactly the right time. And I think that that's an impossible standard for us to live up to, and trying to do it will burn you out. But if you trust what you're already teaching and recognize that literature is already doing this work, then you don't have to scramble. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to teach your text and leave room for the conversation to breathe. I know over the past couple of years, I've taught things that I'm like, I am literally just teaching the text, but this can go in directions that might feel uncomfortable. And I think like we're already there, right? And I think it's just like leaning into the text and helping the students to have the conversation that they need to have, but not leading them to any particular place, if that makes sense. One of the things that I talk about is giving students guardrails so that we can scaffold conversations about the text. We don't necessarily need to scaffold the direct place that they go, if you understand the distinction that I'm making. So you don't need to tell them we're going to talk about, some kind of thing with political landmines. We're talking about this pattern that we see in the text that shows up in the world too. And staying grounded in the literature is what keeps us like in our job. It's literally our job. So the curriculum holds it. You don't have to carry it alone. The curriculum itself helps you to carry it. And I think what I want to just emphasize here is that when the world feels heavy and you're wondering if what you do matters, our discipline is the antidote. We teach students to keep their eyes open, to read what's in front of them, to look at evidence and use their eyes and their ears, and to understand that people may be trying to manipulate them in various ways. The algorithm manipulates them, the people, all kinds of people in power may manipulate them. Um, and just to see that, to know that it happens and to read their world critically. We put them inside perspectives that aren't their own so that they can recognize when a narrative is missing a story. It's not a soft skill. It's really an essential skill, and we get to teach that. It's what the world is so desperate for right now. We know that it is so important to teach students to read carefully and think critically and understand that you are not teaching books. You're building the humans who can navigate this world. And you're not leading them to any particular ideology. It's just helping them to understand that this is the world that we're living in. Here's something to think about as you look at the rest of your year. I think one of the things to understand is that you can't build this container in a crisis. You build it across the year. So when anything arrives, the structure already exists. So if this is the first time your students have ever done like reflective journaling, it's going to feel weird, of course. The container has to already be there. So the real work isn't how do I respond to what's happening this week? Because unfortunately, this week is not just this week, right? The real work is design work. Summer U planned this curriculum. Summer U was working from June or July or August. And Summer U had no idea, or maybe you had some idea, but you didn't really know what the world would look like by February. So here we are. The world Summer U planned for doesn't exist anymore. But February, you gets to ask, what conversations do I want to leave space for the rest of the year? And what matters to me? And what do I think my students need, given everything? And I think that this is a good time to look at your remaining texts, to think about what they're already about and what human questions are they already asking. And I want to be really honest with you here. As I was thinking about this, I was like, my curriculum already holds the conversations that I want to have for the rest of the year. But not every curriculum can hold these conversations, and not every text can. So if you're looking at your curriculum map and nothing on it gives students a framework to think about power or truth or narrative, that's information. And it's a curriculum design problem to work through. Literature can hold this. That's what it's for. But you have to choose texts that actually do the holding. I saw Brave New Teaching was talking about dystopian fiction, and I think that that's a really excellent thing to look at right now. I talked over the summer quite a bit about science fiction and how science fiction, it literally, like the job of science fiction is to play out consequences in a safe way to circumstances that are happening in society in the world. So that is also a really good place to look. But really, there are so many, like we can look at any of our texts. We can look at like Romeo and Juliet. We can look at Macbeth and the universality of his work. We can look at Gothic literature and what that's working through. It's all about anxieties and tensions. And I do think that this is a place, if you have the ability to think about the text in your curriculum and make some changes, I think this is a good time to just think like, are these the conversations that my students need to have for the rest of the year? Do the texts that I am about to teach hold the conversations that I want to have? And does it build the types of people that we need for the world going forward? It might be that you look at your text in a slightly different way. Maybe you focus on something that you didn't focus on before, but understanding that we do need to give students a space to process. And English, for what it's worth, is the place. They're not going to have these conversations in, math. So that's really the power of literature. I've been seeing this more and more lately that we, like a lot of authors, write because they need to work through what haunts them. And when things need to be worked through, like it is what literature does. Like I have a story to tell. I'm seeing something about humanity and about the world, and I need to share it. And I think understanding, especially now, that literature is a conversation and not a conclusion is something that's really important for us and also for our students. Okay, your turn. Two things to think about today. First, what are you teaching right now? What is that text already about? Not what it's connected to, but what is it already about in a big humanity sense? What's the larger human conversation that it can hold? And if there's an opening this week, it doesn't need to be a whole lesson. It just needs to be a place where you hold a little bit of opening. Where could you let the conversation breathe a little bit more? You can try the structure that I'm using where I'm just using a journal where I'm asking them to look at the literature, some kind of something specific in the text, and just connect it to real life. And then, second, pull up your curriculum map for the rest of the year and think about what conversations do you want to leave space for? What do the remaining texts already hold? And honestly, is there anything that can't hold what your students need right now? And remember, summer you plan for a different world. February you gets to adjust. And if adjusting means rethinking what's on the syllabus for next year, good. That's the work. That's what I've got this week. You don't have to be the expert in what's happening in the world. You just have to be the person who teaches texts that matter and holds space when students bring themselves to it. That's the job, and that's enough. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next week.